Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. This is your spot to get inspiration, tips, stories, and guidance to help you in your legal nurse consulting practice. I'm Pat Iyer, the host of Legal Nurse Podcast since 2016. We are among the top 5% of all podcasts in the world in terms of longevity and sharing information consistently week after week with legal nurse consultants. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. I'm Pat Iyer, and today we're going to focus on one of the valuable skills that LNCs offer, and that is helping attorneys who are looking at electronic medical records understand what's under the covers. What can you learn from an audit trail that put new facts together and sheds new light on the events associated with the medical care that the patient received? I have as my guest a seasoned nurse practitioner and a seasoned legal nurse consultant who has over 30 years of experience in healthcare and focuses in on helping legal nurse consultants and attorneys in analyzing medical records to tease out some of the hidden information that an audit trail can reveal. This guest is Amy Puls. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to be here.
We're going to start with a concept of what is an audit trail, because some of our listeners may be unfamiliar with that term and not be fully aware of the power of getting an audit trail.
It's a great question. So an audit trail is essentially a time-stamped history of the auditable actions that a user within the electronic health record performs. We call it the metadata, but for those who don't know what the metadata is, it's essentially the data of the deeper data. It tells you exactly who was in the audit trail, when they were in it, what they did when they were in the audit trail, or I should say when they were in the medical record, not the audit trail, and where they were located when they accessed the medical record. I like to give a little analogy, if I can, to help people really understand what an audit trail shows. I'm going to use the analogy of a library, even though we don't go into libraries a lot anymore. But if you can imagine the library that you used to go into, there is essentially a security camera that watches every person go in and out of the library. It watches that person touch each individual book and which section in the library they're at, what book they actually touched, what book they opened, what page they opened to, and what time they did that, or maybe how often they did it. What it doesn't tell you in the camera is what particularly was in that book. Okay, so what the words were in the book. So that would be equivalent to the electronic health record shares with you what is actually being documented. What the audit trail shows is exactly what's on that security camera. So everything else that would not be in the medical record.
A brief example of this, to clarify, is a case that I was involved in and helped the attorney settle for $12 million last year. The man who was the medical director of the hospital testified in his deposition that he never looked at the medical record after the incident occurred. But the audit trail showed that he was in the medical record within 12 hours after it happened. It showed what pages he looked at. It showed what pages he printed from the medical record, all in direct contradiction to his testimony.
Yeah, there's some profound information that you can get from an audit trail. I do have a couple cases, if you don't mind me sharing those. I think
Please.
this would be a great time to go into that since you just shared yours. Both of these cases come to mind because they have very similar diagnoses, similar patient diagnoses. But the difference was that we were brought in very early on one case and very late on another, and the difference that that can make. So we always encourage attorneys to bring in somebody to look at the audit trail very, very early, because it can shorten the length of the trial, or even if you don't go to trial. So case number one, this is a very common case that we talk about because we share it with a lot of our students in our course, because it had a profound impact on the outcome of the case. Some of you, if the listeners have taken our course, you will have heard this already. But nonetheless, there was a gentleman who was very, very healthy, very athletic. He was a firefighter paramedic. He was working out. He had sudden onset leg pain. He went to the emergency room with this awful leg pain. Unfortunately, really no studies were done in the emergency room, and he was eventually discharged home with the diagnosis of leg pain. Over the course of about 4 months, he continued to have increased leg pain, was seen by multiple providers, upwards of, 5 providers plus a physical therapist, was given multiple different types of pain medication. Nothing was helping, surprise. And after about 4.5 months, he finally had an ultrasound done of his leg. And unfortunately, it showed extensive circulatory collapse of the limb because of a very, very large blood clot that had formed and then grew over that course of 4.5 months. So he eventually had an amputation. So he lost his job. He was disabled. So obviously he sued. And what the attorney group found during their workup of this case, during all of their depositions, they deposed all 6 providers, including the physical therapist, and every single one of them indicated that they knew exactly what the other providers had been doing, that they had read all of their notes, they were all communicating back and forth with each other. And right before trial, I would say it was about 3 to 4 weeks before trial, the attorneys who had had the audit trail for quite a while by then finally decided maybe we should get somebody to look at this audit trail to see if there's anything else that can help us going into trial. So they called us. We looked at the audit trail. They had prefaced all of this indicating that they had already looked at it. They didn't find anything, but they just wanted a second set of eyes. And we looked through it and very, very quickly found some pretty key findings. Some of them being that only one of the treating providers had actually viewed the patient's notes from any of the other ones. And that provider was only in the medical record for 13 seconds. Clearly not enough time to look at all of the different records that were being documented. And after looking into that medical record, had then gone back to his note to make an addendum indicating that he had seen the Doppler that was performed, even though that Doppler result had never been opened by that provider. So we saw a lot of obviously red flags. We brought this to the attorney's attention. Trial date was already set. They had already gone through mediation, and obviously trial was going. So during trial, defense was bringing up all of their defendants, and they only got through 3 of them because by the 3rd one, none of them could argue what was found in the audit trail. And they called the case right at that moment. They never finished the trial. I shouldn't say they never finished it. They never finished their witnesses that they called up. What ended up happening is the jury sided in favor of the plaintiff in 11-1 verdict, I believe. And at the end, the plaintiff attorney asked the jurors, what was the deciding factor for them? And every single one of them said the audit trail was the deciding factor. So Obviously, looking back, they know that they probably should have brought us in earlier because they could have saved a big trial.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, it was definitely in their favor. The second one, we were brought in extremely early. They had just gotten the medical records. They luckily got the audit trail on the first try. They called us up. They said, we need you to look at this audit trail. This was a very similar case. It was a gentleman who presented to the ER, again, with lower extremity pain. And this time a Doppler was performed in the ER, but the Doppler was reportedly found to not show any blood clot per the ER physician. The patient was sent home with leg pain and no other causative reason for the leg pain. Unfortunately, when he went into the parking lot, almost to his vehicle, he collapsed. EMS was called. He was brought back to the ER. By that time, was seen by a different ER physician. So this is ER physician number 2. He diagnosed a massive pulmonary embolism. Luckily, he survived. I'm not sure how he did when I saw the records, but he did. And ER physician number 2 realized he had had the Doppler. Doppler results were not in the record. He called the radiologist to get verbal results from the radiologist, who then reported he had a massive blood clot in his leg. Long story short, MD number 1 claimed that he had received a phone call from the radiologist and that he had read the report that there was no blood clot. The audit trail showed otherwise. The audit trail showed that the radiology report had not even been documented or reported before the patient was discharged home. The patient was in the ER for less than 45 minutes. He was discharged within 10 minutes of coming back from radiology. And the discharge instructions were written by the number 1 physician prior to the patient even having the ultrasound done.
Mm.
So the radiology report was not read by the physician number 1 until the following day, so 24 hours later, after that physician realized the patient had come back with a pulmonary embolism. He went back and addended his note, and this case never went to trial. It was settled for a very, very large sum of money prior to. It was very, very short compared to case number 1.
And think about all the money that the plaintiff firm saved by getting that case resolved as quickly as it did.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the most important part, is getting it done early so that you can save money and save time.
Mm-hmm. Those are great examples of a similar type of case, with the difference between bringing you in trial versus bringing you in at the beginning of the case.
Yeah. Yep.
Are there different kinds of audit trails, or when you say get an audit trail, are you talking about the same type of output in each instance?
Yeah, large picture, there are different types of audit trails, but in general, the most common audit trail is what we know as the patient audit trail. This is, when anybody's requesting audit trail, they're going to request the patient's audit trail. However, if you have a case that has a lot of different subspecialties in it, let's say, it's a labor and delivery case, it's a cardiology case, there's radiology involved, pharmacy, obviously, anything big like that, you most of the time, especially in Epic, you will most of the time need to request what we call module specific audit trails. And Epic has specific names for each of them. Some of the other electronic health records also have those specific audit trails, but they're not called that. And they're not as pretty as an Epic audit trail. But for the most part, we always get the patient audit trail.
And in the case that I mentioned earlier, one of our concerns was what medications were given in the delivery room. And we discovered that we could ask for the records from the medication carts.
Mhm.
That one that was in the labor and delivery area, and a separate medication cart was in the operating room. And we got both of those to help clear up some confusion about what was done in that case.
Yeah, for the most part, most of those, other items being used in the hospital system or even in the clinic system, you can request an audit trail on. The unfortunate thing is some of the monitor systems only keep the data for a certain period of time, and it's usually designated by either the hospital system itself or the monitor company. And oftentimes 30 days tends to be kind of that golden time. So a lot of times you won't get that from them, but if you get into things early enough, you might be able to get it. But definitely from the medication cards, you can get an audit trail from that.
Tell us about the type of output. Suppose you get a PDF as a result of a request for an audit trail. Can you work with a PDF trail, or should you be asking for the output in a different format?
Yeah, this is a big irritating point for me because when you ask for an audit trail, so often we get it in PDF format from the facility or from the defense, let's say. It has to come in Excel. And the reason that is because when the audit trail is initially produced, it is more often than not produced in Excel. When you receive it in PDF, what they've done is they've taken the Excel format of the audit trail and they've saved it as a PDF document. So if you've ever seen an audit trail, there's multiple different columns and hundreds, if not thousands of lines. And the columns can stretch out far enough so that when you save it as a PDF, the end columns get cut off.
Mm-hmm.
So you are losing a ton of data right there. Plus, the PDF isn't going to save with thousands of lines. So you will be cutting off from the bottom and most of the time getting maybe one sheet, if not maybe five. And you're also cutting off the columns. So you really cannot use a PDF for an audit trail. It has to come in Excel format.
It's my pleasure to have you meet Amy Puls, who is one of the speakers at our November 13, 14, and 15, 2025 LNC online conference. Amy is a nurse practitioner and an expert in an area of nursing that is truly fascinating called evaluating audit trails. Audit trails are derived from medical records, and this is an area of practice that helps attorneys understand what happened during the course of care that is captured in an electronic medical record and then pulled apart. Amy's topic is called Problems, Pearls, and Priorities, using a case study approach for evaluating an audit trail. Amy, tell us a little bit about what you're planning to cover in your session and why it's so important for legal nurse consultants to get this information.
So I am going to cover all the problems, pearls, and priorities. We'll use a case study to navigate the audit trail so that the viewer and the listener can work through that audit trail with me as though they were working through the case on their own. We'll navigate through all of the problems or some of the problems that you might come upon, how to solve the problems, and what to do if you cannot get those problems solved. And then where your priorities should be, depending on what you find in the audit trail.
What can the person who attends your session be able to walk away from after that approximately 1 hour program?
So my goal is that they will obtain some very valuable strategies that they can use in real life situations while they are navigating the audit trails, and be able to pinpoint on their own what type of problems come up and how they can assist their attorney clients in solving the problems and navigating through all of that.
This session is going to be a real treat. Concrete strategies to help you understand some of the basics of audit trails, a skill that you can go deeper into with appropriate training. You'll get a feel for whether this is an area of legal nurse consulting that appeals to you. It is definitely in the lane of people who like to be exquisitely detail-oriented. One term, one entry in an audit trail can blow a case out of the water. And you'll need to find out how that could happen by attending Amy's session at our conference. The link to join us is lnc.tips/ The link to join us to attend this conference is lnc.tips/NOV25. That will give you an opportunity to see this great agenda that we've put together. 3 days of virtual education specifically designed for you as a legal nurse consultant to build your business, strengthen your skills, get more clients, and become more successful. Be sure to join us for our conference November 13, 14, and 15, 2025 at the link right below my video. I'll see you there. And I would assume also, because if it's an Excel spreadsheet, you could sort information if you were looking for specific items to be grouped together.
Yeah, that's the benefit of Excel. If people are familiar with using Excel, it's incredible for doing a search and for filtering. And that's what we need to do when we have an Excel spreadsheet audit trail, is we have to filter and search appropriately in order to get the information that we need, because it's just an incredible amount of information in one Excel document.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do that with PDF, unfortunately.
Tell us also about the importance of knowing what type of EMR was used in this patient's care in order to be able to request an audit trail.
Yeah, so each EMR software is slightly different. So for some of the listeners who, especially the nurses who have worked with multiple different EHRs before, you know that every single one of them has just a slightly bit different way of documenting something. So some of them are more user-friendly than others, and the same thing comes out when you have an output of an audit trail. The more user-friendly it is to use and document, the more user-friendly it's going to be to read the audit trail. Not only that, but they have a different quality of metadata that is extrapolated from the medical record and put into an audit trail. So you have to know what medical record or EHR system you're using so that you understand what it's going to look like and what you should be able to see in the audit trail in order to verify that you've gotten the correct audit trail, an accurate audit trail, and that it has the same integrity as what you're expecting to have.
And I was involved in one case in which the attorney made an assumption about the type of electronic medical record and used terms specific to his assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And the defense turned around and said, "Oh, no, we don't have to give you an audit trail," essentially without saying it. He didn't use the right words, and therefore they weren't going to cooperate because he used the wrong terms.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're requesting the audit trail, it's important to know and to understand not only what type of EHR you're using so that you know what type of column headers are in it, but also to request it appropriately. So for instance, if you request just simply, I would like you to produce the audit trail, they're going to come back and tell you that they don't have it. They can't produce an audit trail. But if you are very, very specific with your verbiage, you are more likely to get the correct audit trail, an accurate audit trail, and one that matches the medical records, either with the first try, or if not the second, sometimes the third try. And we often specify certain standards, like the audit trail standards, and we call it the ASTM standards. We also will specify CFR. So we will quote the CFR codes. We'll quote high tech if we have to. Most of the time, ASTM is sufficient, but if you want, I can give you an example of some of the verbiage that we use so that maybe some of the listeners can write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that can help them request it appropriately. So we usually say, in addition to a bunch of other things, but we always say this in every audit trail request, produce the complete EHR audit trail in an unedited, unlocked Excel spreadsheet for patient name, their date of birth, and then you give dates. So beginning on whatever date you're looking for, and that date can be the date that you have in question, or if they were admitted to the hospital, it can be the very first date that they were admitted through, and then the date that you go through is through the date that the records were printed. And that's important because if you only go through the date that the patient was, let's say, discharged, you have missed all of the opportunity that providers could go back after the patient was discharged and edit or addend some notes, which we know sometimes happens if they've forgotten something. But sometimes when that happens, it's actually a bit incriminating and it can show some big red flags. So you always go through the date that the records were printed.
You take me back, Amy, to the last job that I had when I was an employee and was working as a nursing quality assurance coordinator. And the nurses were being told that they should finish off their notes after the patient discharged before the chart went to medical records. And they were asking me for guidance on this. And I said, you shouldn't be asking nurses to go in and write up notes after discharge. If you have to put in an entry, it should be marked clearly as a late entry, but
Yeah.
they were not marking these as late entries. And these were handwritten notes, not electronic notes. And I was able to stop the practice from a risk management perspective, which delighted the nurses because it was a huge burden and they felt very uncomfortable with being asked to go down to medical records and add things to their nurses' notes after the patient had gone home.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in a similar situation to that, Pat, and I didn't do it. I refused. It was actually my nurse manager who asked me to do it, and I refused to do it. Yeah, and we know that it's not always a bad thing to go and addend your note if you forgot something, but like you said, you have to put late entry, or if there isn't anything that says late entry or late addendum, or if it doesn't give the reason for it, then that's potentially a red flag.
Well, we talked about the defense showing resistance to a request for an audit trail if you don't use the appropriate terms. And we also know that there are other reasons that they give plaintiff attorneys as to why they couldn't possibly cooperate with this request. Can you give us an outline of some of the sources of resistance that an LNC might hear the attorney, their client, talking about?
Yeah, unfortunately that there are still resistance. They're starting to improve more that the more we see audit trails being requested, but we still hear that it's a fishing expedition. We're just fishing for something that's not necessary or that's not there. We hear that it's expensive, and we've found out time and time again it's not. It's not any more expensive than just requesting normal medical records. We hear that they are unable to produce an audit trail, and we know that that's not true because CFR says that you must be able to produce an audit trail, especially if you get Medicare, Medicaid funding. We hear that it's too difficult, it's too time consuming. There's a lot. I'm telling you, there's a lot. I think one case that I have right now, we had 7 requests and finally got an audit trail that looked to be sufficient. It still wasn't complete, but it gave us what we needed, so we didn't go any further. So, I'm hoping that the longer this goes out, that we continue to be educated in audit trails, that requests will improve. But yeah, we're still seeing a lot of pushback.
And for the sake of clarity, you may have spelled this out. CFR is the Code of Federal
Federal
Regulations
regulations,
that
yeah.
governs hospitals.
Yep, governs
And
HIPAA, governs high tech, yeah. Yep.
well, let's flip it. When would a defense attorney benefit from having an audit trail?
Defense attorneys and plaintiff attorneys will benefit from virtually a lot of the same things, and that is to give them a tighter timeline to what the medical record is showing. Okay, because we know that there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that don't end up in the medical record. And where you'll see them is in the audit trail. So you're going to fill in the gaps of the medical record. Specifically, defense attorneys can look at the audit trail, and it will help them prepare for their client's deposition testimony. They can also prepare understanding maybe what some of the plaintiff's tactics might be. Because if they find something in an audit trail that could potentially be a negative thing for their client, they can already assume what the plaintiff is going to probably come up with. And it will give them some insights into some of those strategies. Similarly, with the plaintiff attorney and the defense attorney, it can corroborate all of the witnesses' testimonies because you can prove what they're testifying to in the audit trail or disprove, right? Like we learned from some of the case studies that I talked about. So there's a lot of different things. There's internal messaging that we see in medical record or in audit trails that don't show up in the medical record. And depending on the time frame of that, you sometimes can get the contents of that internal messaging if they have saved it for a certain period of time. And that's case by case basis and hospital to hospital. But there's a lot of things in the medical or in the audit trail that doesn't show up in the medical record that can help both the defense and the plaintiff.
And I'm thinking from the defense perspective, and I think you've touched on it, that the plaintiff may assert a sequence of events that is not supported by either the medical record or the audit trail. I've worked on cases where the plaintiff didn't remember information correctly, or maybe had an incentive to shade the truth, and the medical record didn't support what the plaintiff said happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to talk to you about this really quick, and this is touching on this a little bit, that I just had a conversation with some defense attorneys the other day, and they were asking me to be an expert in this case. And I was looking through the records, and there were just some things missing. There were pieces missing in the records. And something just didn't make sense to me based upon what they had told me the story was. And of course, their version of the story came from their client. So when I was looking through the medical record, it didn't make sense to me. So I asked them while we were on the Zoom, I said, did you ever get the audit trail? And they said, oh yeah, we have the audit trail. It doesn't show anything. So I asked them to search in the audit trail for something specific that I knew would help me piece things together in the medical record and answer my big question that I was so uncomfortable with. And he searched and he said, no, I don't find it. It's not in here. I asked him to share his screen with me. And what I found was that the way he was searching it wasn't the way he was supposed to be searching it. And there's no wonder why he wasn't getting the information he wanted. So I walked him through how to search specifically for what I was looking for. And it's like a light bulb went off in his head, and his eyes went wide open when we found it. And it answered my question, and I wasn't able to support their claim because of it. So it literally can be one little thing that can help or break your whole case. And if you aren't prepared for that, especially as a defense attorney, and you get to mediation or trial, and the plaintiff attorney found it, well, you know, it's gonna cost you a lot of money and a lot of time.
Well, that brings up my next to my last question, which is who should be looking at the output of audit trails?
So I'm a legal nurse, so I would tell you a legal nurse, but there are a lot of people out there that know a lot about audit trails. Um, I would say this is going towards attorneys. If you don't understand how to search through an audit trail, reach out to somebody. There are a lot of legal nurses that are being trained in audit trail analysis right now. There are physicians that are being trained that have gone through our courses, and I know I've gone through some other courses. And then we've been helping to train some paralegals and even attorneys that know how to do it. So there's not, there's no reason to go through an audit trail without the training or without somebody helping you. I would say everybody who has an audit trail, you have to get somebody to go through it, even if you think you know how to do it, because maybe you know how to work Excel. The audit trail is a whole different beast. So you got to get somebody that's trained.
And the key word is training.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to be on a Zoom call with somebody who was a specialist, a nurse, in understanding audit trails. And I could tell she knew exactly where to look for information and she could interpret the results that we were getting. There were a whole bunch of risk management people on the call off camera, but they were exuding anxiety because she was blowing apart the defense positions.
Yeah.
And proving that what the defense was saying was incorrect. And I think they believed she wouldn't be able to figure it out. She
Mhm.
did.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel, there's so many people that are able to look through audit trails, but I think if you have, and this is my opinion, but and from experience and then from hearing this from other people as well, is that the higher your comfort level with the medical record itself and where things happen in the medical record, the more you can navigate the audit trail and piece things together a lot easier. So I really think that legal nurses are put in a great position to be very, very helpful in analyzing the audit trail because they can look at it from the whole picture. They know what happened in the hospital and how it got in the medical record. And then they can also look at the audit trail and say, oh, I know what was happening here. Um, it's a profound way to look at the whole case.
It is, going back to how we started this show, it's an area where our detail oriented skills as legal nurse consultants can help
Mhm.
pull back the covers and take a look at what happened, what additional information is available that may not be visible in the medical record. My colleague, Barbara Levin, talks about a hematologist who looked at a lab result while she was sitting in the operating room and had that screen open for 5 minutes. And she testified in her deposition, this doctor, that she never saw the result.
Oh, no.
But the audit trail showed that she did, and that was a decisive factor in the outcome of the case.
Yeah.
Tell our listener or viewer watching this on our YouTube channel how they can get in touch with you to find out more about the services and the training that you offer.
So you can email us if you want more information. Our email is info@audittrailnurses.com. We also have a course listing, kind of a website. It's more of a course listing, and that is https://learn.audittrailnurses.com. And just for the listeners, that specific website is being adjusted right now because we are adjusting our courses. So we pulled things off and then we'll be putting them all back on very soon when our courses come back out. We'll have more courses, more things to look at, and more offerings for you.
Thank you, Amy. I know that people have gone through your training and found it to be incredibly helpful. This is a subspecialty of legal nurse consulting that is not part of the typical LNC curriculum and is a value-added service as attorneys become increasingly aware of the benefit of working with legal nurse consultants and audit trails. So I encourage you to take a look at the training that Amy has available and see if it's something that makes sense for you in your business services. Thank you, Amy, for being part of our guests list on Legal Nurse Podcast. I appreciate you and the expertise that you have shared with our listener.
Thank you, Pat. It was great to be here.
And hang on a few more minutes to find out what's coming up next on the next episode of Legal Nurse Podcast. Be sure to go also to podcast.legalnursebusiness.com. We now offer our past podcasts, 9 years worth, going on 10, starting on September, right after Labor Day in this country. Beginning of September was when we launched our show in 2016. And we have included for you opportunities to get the transcripts, the recordings, and the audio files when all are available for our podcasts. The beauty of this is that you can search by topic and find the shows that are of most interest to you. That's at podcast.legalnursebusiness.com. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next show. Coming up next on Legal Nurse Podcast, we're going to delve into some of the factors that make you successful, specifically helping you define how are you unique? What types of cases are best suited for you? How do you make sure that you are conveying your value in your brand and across the touch points that you have with attorneys? You'll get some practical tips and some action steps at the end of the podcast by coming back to Legal Nurse Podcast or clicking on down next for the next show at Legal Nurse Podcast. Thank you. Thank you for being part of the Legal Nurse Podcast audience. I'm delighted that you've joined us for this episode. Be sure to go to legalnursebusiness.com and get your free reports. Look around the website, pick up some tools that will be useful for you in your legal nurse consulting practice. And be sure to join us for the next episode.